Time for Worldview with Denis Campbell, not on Thursday this week, but one day early on Wednesday, because we are taping early tomorrow as I will be heading to the National Conference for Media Reform in Denver, Colorado. More information about that tomorrow. Denis, of course, is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine and host of Worldview with Denis Campbell on YouTube at youtube.com/worldview show. Denis, we've been talking about North Korea really for weeks now and about the increased and escalated rhetoric and more specific threats about what North Korea will do with regard to sending rocket strikes towards the U.S. and potentially towards South Korea. In the U.S., there's kind of two views on this. There's probably more than two views, but colloquially, there's two views. One is we need to be preemptively striking North Korea because this is a really serious threat. Or the other extreme is it's all talk. They don't even have the capability to do anything, and we don't need to worry about it. Of course, there's shades of gray within that, but I'm curious, what's the view in the UK on the North Korean threats?
Well, you're looking at a country that has really very few friends left in the world, and even today they've managed now to irritate China,
right,
which has been their biggest supporter. They are filled with bluff and bluster, and every year the U.S. and the South Koreans hold joint military exercises, and that is when they tend to kind of go off the deep end, but nothing like what they're doing right now. I have to say that to threaten preemptive nuclear attacks against the United States, against President Obama, who has already shown that he has absolutely no compunction launching drones or B-2 bombers or anything else. This is one badass president. You don't mess with him. It's just more than a bit disconcerting. And you also can look at it from the point of view that, being an isolated nation as they've been for so long and living under crippling sanctions, they're surrounded by Russia and China and Japan. They have U.S. troops to the south on their southern border. You could understand also how they might be, feeling a bit threatened by that presence as well.
Do you think the average of the points of view in Europe and the UK is to be more alarmed than in the U.S. about the threats or less alarmed? And of course, we have to take into consideration credibility, but also the fact that he's specifically talking about attacking the U.S.
Well, I think the general response I've seen in looking across most of Europe is one of, well, let's just sort of wait and see, which is not an unusual response. Also, keep in mind that because of the location here, we are well outside of the range of any attack that could be launched, nor do we tend to fall into the radar or even on the radar screen of North Korea. So it's less of a concern here, more of a concern of, you don't want to hit the USA hornet's nest too many times with that stick, because at some point in time it's going to fall down on top of your head.
There's almost some element of this where you can't help but feel like it's the one kid who's not allowed to play in the sandbox and therefore is just throwing water on the sand so no one else can play. Just being loud and doing anything just to get attention in a sense. The problem is that there are actual lives at stake, potentially the ones that would be on the receiving end of the attacks, but really the humanitarian crisis inside of North Korea, which a lot of people forget.
It's horrifically bad inside of that country. They have no crops from which to speak of. They're totally dependent on what they get from China. They're totally dependent on, what the Kim Jong-un, the new supposedly superior leader, and the generals decide to allow to go down to the people. It is a horrifically oppressive situation, and it's something that people in the South Korea don't even want to talk about. They recognize that it's there, but it's been pretty much business as usual despite the heated rhetoric. There's not much happening. There's not much changing. People are still going to work. There's still cafes are open, the hotels are filled. There's still a lot happening inside of Korea itself right now, and one wonders for how much longer. If they move down, below the 39th parallel and actually do launch an attack, it's going to be a completely different ballgame there. But most don't take anything that this regime says seriously. They've done this every year. They've even closed the border before. They closed it in 2009. The shutting down of the Kaesong industrial complex is nothing necessarily new. That itself is new because it's a joint South-North venture. but they're used to him acting crazy whenever there are joint military exercises with the South.
There's a new TED Talk, I believe from TED 2013, which just took place in February on TED.com, of a young woman who actually escaped from North Korea. And I don't know if you've seen it, Dennis. I highly recommend all of our audience check it out. The story she tells and of going back to get her family, it's just incredible. And I don't think, we have fun talking about Dennis Rodman and all of the weird, wacky stuff that goes on. But the level of the humanitarian crisis that exists there is, you would almost imagine you're on another planet when you hear the stories.
Well, I mean, we talked about, people being disappeared in your former country, when Cardinal Bergoglio, now the Pope Francis, was there in the 1970s. That's nothing compared to what happens. Entire families are uprooted, even on the slightest hint of suspicion. If you thought Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator, you haven't seen anything until you looked at Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il. And what he was able to do. And unfortunately, in these despotic regimes, the only way they rule is through absolute fear, terror, brainwashing, whatever is necessary to get people to come around and stay to their point of view. There's certainly some of that going on. Some people have suggested that maybe Kim Jong-un is not ready for the job. He's almost 30 years old, and he has a pretty decent head on his shoulders. What he hasn't had the time to do is to, really form the kind of alliances with the members of the military side that his father would have had and been able to be in control. So there is the real concern there that there may be one or two members of that senior group that are still pulling some of the strings and causing some of these things to happen. But this is, very strange that he would come out and threaten preemptive nuclear strikes. That got everybody's attention, and justifiably so.
Make sure to subscribe to Worldview with Dennis Campbell on YouTube. The channel is youtube.com/worldview show. Click subscribe. Don't miss any of the videos. What's coming up tonight, Dennis?
Tonight we have a very interesting interview with a woman here in the United Kingdom. Her name is Caroline Criado Perez, and she has started something called the Women's Room. And this is a website where people can go to find expert pundits on a variety of topics, because the ratio is something like 20-1 men to women on television in the United Kingdom, as well as there in the US, in terms of the expert pundits. She's very young, and she's done a fabulous job doing this, and we've got her on the show tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis, for being on a day early, and we will catch up with you next week.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know quite where I was on a Wednesday afternoon being on your show.
It's confusing me too, but we got through it. All right, Dennis, talk to you next week.
All the best.